there's plenty of bad situations that can happen when it comes to people that want to date me.
Shauna Rae has been in the headlines lately for way more than just her reality TV show. There's a new man in her life, but some people think that their connection is insanely controversial, and so Shauna's new boyfriend is finally being exposed, and all the bizarre information on him is just outrageous. So guys, I Am Shauna Rae first premiered last year, and the show's second season just recently finished airing on TLC. And the show follows a 23-year-old Shauna who has faced so many unbelievable obstacles, but when she was only 6 months old, she was diagnosed with brain cancer, and Shauna went through some powerful treatments that thankfully saved her life. But as beneficial as they were, the medical therapies also led to another jaw-dropping diagnosis when Shauna's life-saving treatments wreaked havoc on her pituitary gland, and it no longer functioned the way it was supposed to, and in turn her hormones were impacted, which shockingly caused her to develop pituitary dwarfism, and now Shauna's adult height is about 3'10", and her reality show highlights the struggles and challenges that she faces because of her height. But that's not all. On the second season of I Am Shauna Rae, we watched as Shauna worked on gaining independence from her family, and there was also a huge focus on her dating life and the difficulties that she experienced because of her dwarfism. And I remember when Shauna was promoting the season before it aired, and she excitedly mentioned a man that she'd been talking to online, and thankfully we finally got to see exactly who that was. So the mystery man's name is Dan, that Shauna briefly spoke about in interviews and articles months ago, and when the second season was released, he was eventually brought into the storyline, and I was surprised that Shauna revealed that they'd been talking online for quite a while, and that she'd even already met Dan once for a quick visit, and now we've been able to learn all about Dan, which has just been really kind of surprising. So Dan, who's 26 years old, is actually from Wales, which is a part of the United Kingdom, and as I'm sure you probably figured, that's why he and Shauna spent so much time video chatting and getting to know each other online. And during one episode they revealed that they'd been talking basically every day, but being from across the ocean wasn't the only reason why they communicated mainly online, and this is just so crazy. So believe it or not, Dan is a full-time traveler and basically lives out of a backpack, and he runs his own travel blog, and he even turned his passion into an insanely successful business venture. And when Shauna said on the show that Dan was also an app developer, I kind of thought it was interesting, but Dan's apps have proven to be way more than any kind of a side hustle, and have even helped him reach some absolutely unreal achievements. So Dan's travel app, Alpacker, was founded in 2017, and it launched the following year, and since then Dan has promoted his apps while traveling all over the world, and the app has also led Dan to win the Virgin Voom startup competition, which was run by Richard Branson, an extremely successful British entrepreneur. But that's not all, because everything in his professional life is honestly just unreal. Because Dan has achieved so much success with his app with the help of investors, he recently decided to start his own venture startup company, Raise Easy. But that's not even one of his first experiences with running a business. I was completely floored to discover that Dan also works for several other software and technology companies, and I guess that's part of the reason I was so taken aback by how nervous he was for an important meeting. I mean, in an episode of the show, Dan traveled to Shauna's family's home in Long Island, where he met Patty and Mark, Shauna's mom and stepdad, and while Dan was preparing sushi for the family, they absolutely grilled him, and I can't even imagine how stressful it must have been to prepare food, meet your potential, partner's family for the first time ever, and answer countless questions all at the same time and while being filmed. And Dan wasn't even in an exclusive relationship with Shauna at that moment, but that didn't stop Patty and Mark from interrogating him, and when the travel topic came up, the conversation took a super intense turn. Patty and Mark questioned Dan about if he was going to slow down with traveling in the future so that they could settle down, and I think anyone would wonder how a significant other might factor into Dan's life because of how constantly he travels. But it still was a little awkward, because finally Shauna's parents seemingly gave Dan their approval, and after that Shauna and Dan went on a few different dates throughout the season, and some were pretty uncomfortable. I mean, Dan and Shauna went paddle boarding and kayaking, and even though Shauna is devastatingly afraid of water, and I did think it was really nice that Dan showed his support when Shauna was working at a charity event to help kids, with brain injuries, but overall there sometimes seems to be a slight personality clash that just kind of threw me off. And apparently I'm not the only one who wasn't so sure, how they felt about Dan, and a lot of people have been been commenting online about how many insane red flags they saw with Dan. I mean, the criticism he's been getting recently is just off the charts. So not only do some viewers think that he's only after his 15 minutes of reality show fame, but they've also raised a pretty major concern, and many viewers have been calling Dan creepy for being romantically interested in Shauna. And because of Dan's attraction to Shauna, who clearly has dwarfism, some people are accusing him of having inappropriate thoughts about kids. And I have a feeling that the tagline that usually gets associated with Shauna and her show doesn't help the controversy at all. And if I'm being honest, it is pretty weird. I mean, the first episode ever, the summary of I Am Shauna Rae referred to Shauna as being trapped in a body of an 8-year-old child. And ever since then, she's been associated with, terms that always seem to kind of go back to being childlike. So I understand that her height is a significant and, noticeable aspect of her, but I feel like Shauna must get tired of people assuming that she isn't an adult. And when it comes to the negative attention that, Dan has been hit with lately, I'm pretty shocked because part of me can't believe the overwhelming hate he's been getting, but there's a part of me that definitely can. I mean, to tell you the truth, Dan did seem curious about getting to know Shauna, but more than anything, I felt like he was just maybe looking for more exposure to promote his business venture, but the accusations about his character and how he might be a dangerous person have been non-stop recently. However, Dan is determined to defend himself, and it's all just so strange. So on his YouTube channel, Dan recently posted some videos explaining what he really wanted people to know, and he said that Shauna is an adult woman who just happens to have a disability, and even though Dan stressed the importance of acknowledging Shauna's condition is a part of who she is, it shouldn't totally define her. And of course, that's not all he had to say, because Dan also fired back at the people who accused him of being creepy for his interest in Shauna, and he claimed that they, just weren't emotionally mature enough to understand that a deep connection can be formed based on personality instead of just on appearances. And I mean, I don't disagree with what Dan said, but the reason why he keeps putting himself in the public eye by making separate videos and posts just seem a little strange. And Dan also revealed in another video that it's really dehumanizing to expect Shauna not to have real connections with people just because of her height. And I was glad that he focused on the human rights aspect and explained that Shauna is just as deserving as anybody else when it comes to every experience in life. But at the same time, it's really hard to not question Dan's motives, especially because of what happened just recently. So surprisingly, Dan's parents, Stephen and Helen, have even been, speaking out on his defense, and they spoke to the Daily Mail about Dan's appearance on I Am Shauna Rae, and I was stunned by what they had to say. So despite Dan and Shauna seemingly, building up their relationship on the show, Helen and Stephen claimed there was nothing romantic happening at all, and Dan's dad didn't even seem to think there was a chance of his son being interested in dating Shauna. And according to Helen, Dan and Shauna are strictly friends, and I just really don't know what to think at this point, because I feel like part of the reason why Dan has gotten so much backlash is because he reached out to Shauna after seeing her on the first season of her show, and he claimed that he was really inspired by how strong she was emotionally, and so he sent her flowers and a well-wishing card. But as much as Dan wants to say that Shauna's personality is what attracted him to her, I kind of have a tough time believing that, because it just seems kind of odd that Dan contacted Shauna after watching her reality show, and I'm not sure what to believe, but I wonder how he could want to start a real connection solely off of Shauna's personality. I mean, reality TV isn't always the best way, to portray someone's genuine self. So since they know they're being filmed, so maybe Dan wasn't just trying to get on TV, but it definitely seems like a possibility. And this and Shauna's appearance are really touchy subjects, but not everyone believes Dan has harmful or inappropriate intentions, and Dan admitted that there were also a lot of support amongst all the negativity, and apparently some people reached out to him to thank him for showing the world that it's okay to have a connection that society believes is wrong just because it's different. And at the end of the season, Shauna was trying to make up her mind about whether she should commit to dating Dan long distance or not, and in the end, she decided that it would be too difficult for her to try to make the relationship work, and the two settled on just being friends for now. So it'll be interesting to see if they stay in touch or if Dan makes an appearance in the new season of the show. But anyway, now I want to know what you guys think. What do you think Dan's true intentions were with Shauna, and what are your thoughts on Dan's professional achievements? Guys, let me know in the comments down below.